Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. We are going to be looking at the latest headline, which is Trump issues executive order removing federal funding for any school or educational program that is going to be requiring COVID vaccines. That's what we're going to be looking at. And I know, I'm going to be poking holes in the ship again. I'm going to be raining on people's parades because I want to dig deeper and I want to look behind the curtains and actually dispel a couple of myths that are swirling around this action. So here it is. You can go right to the whitehouse.gov, and that's where you are going to what's called the original source. So the whitehouse.gov, and then you can click under administration. And after that, you can click, actually, what you can click through is news and then click through presidential actions. And this is going to take you to the executive orders. Now, I have done a deep dive on the whole nature of executive orders, the history, what the Constitution allows or doesn't allow. So I have already covered that. I have a whole playlist about Trump. I have a whole playlist about Musk. So if you are interested in other issues that I'm not talking about today, that's where you can find them. I'm glad that you're on board. We're going to be looking at this right here, keeping education accessible and ending COVID-19 vaccine mandates in school. So I am going to go over this with you in just a moment. And I also want to share a few notes that I jotted down. These will be compiled in my Substack, which is free, and that is at peggyhall.substack.com. So the headline, Trump cuts funding to schools requiring the COVID shot. And several people emailed me applauding, and I understand that, and I'll give you my comments in just a moment. That's why you're tuning in. So I'd like to hear yours as well. Let me just start right with the punchline. No other vaccines are mentioned in this order. So children in K-12 and adults that are going to college, university, trade school, any other educational setting, they are still required to be a human pincushion to attend most of these public institutions and even private ones. So let me dispel myth number one, that this is about getting rid of I don't like to use the word mandate, so I'm going to use the word requirement. This is not about getting rid of the requirements for all of the shots. So I want to give you a little bit of background because since 2020, I have been on the front lines really trying to sound the bell and let people know that the government has no authority to tell you to close down your business, to stay home, to put on some kind of facial covering, to become a human pincushion, to undergo a nasal assault for a disease that we are told so deadly that you don't even know that you have it. And by the way, it's so deadly that you have to cover your face because you might breathe on someone as you walk by and they will drop dead. But instead of breathing on the test swab, they want to dig around up in your brain matter. So I've been talking about that for years, about the lack of authority by the government to undertake these actions to the extent that they did. Yes, there are laws on the books regarding legitimate health emergencies. I've gone through this quite a bit. The quick example is in Orange County, my county in California, that still to this day is under a COVID emergency because they never followed the proper protocols for having a public meeting to receive information from the health officer to determine whether or not this emergency was still valid. In fact, the emergency coalition of the county that consisted of the sheriff, and then there was also the chief of police, there were the heads of hospitals, different individuals that were public servants, as I call them, or either elected or appointed. They had this emergency council. And in the county of Orange, that emergency council met once a quarter. That's what a dire emergency was. They couldn't keep their eye on the ball 24/7, certainly not from 8 to 5, certainly not once a week, not even every other week, not even once a month, not even every other month. They held these meetings quarterly. So that would be an example of evidence demonstrating that there's no emergency. And I have so much more where that came from. Along the way, under Trump's warp speed that RFK Jr. said was an amazing accomplishment because vaccines have saved millions of lives, according to RFK. But then some of you said he just was saying that to get the job, to get the jab. Well, I have said he's the right man for the jab. We'll see if he changes his tune. And I would like to know, is he going to apologize to all of the parents that he told to have their children become human pincushions? Tomorrow, I'm going to share with you how I came up with that number of approximately 80 jabs over the course of a child's lifetime. So from, infant basically, and even in the womb up till the age of 18. And then there are even more that they want adults to get. Kennedy is a proponent of that. He said so in public. He is publicly promoting his desire to protect vaccines. So along the way, Trump came out with his Operation Warp Speed to create these vaccines for people like you and me. Well, I had thousands upon thousands of people watch my free educational videos about how to legally protect their right of no consent. I had a smaller number of people work with me one-on-one, and I can tell you that I know for certain that for the last year, COVID shots have not been required by any schools. So Trump's executive order, in my view, is moot. That means it doesn't really have any impact. Now, we are going to go through it, and I do understand that this will cover any of these required shots going forward, and let's give that some polite applause. Absolutely. But I am relieved to know that, and hopefully you're relieved to know, that for the last year, no one has been required in a public or private setting to get a COVID vaccine. I just want to put that on the record as a fact. So people are looking at this executive order with a sense of relief, not realizing that for the last year, no schools required it. And I know I can hear you again, Peggy, you are so negative. You're so cynical. You're always digging deeper. You're always asking questions. You know that I am. And that's called critical thinking. So just to make it clear, no schools are currently requiring COVID shots, and they haven't since about January of 2024. I'm going to show you that evidence in just a moment. We're going to be looking at the state of California, the state of New York. We're going to be looking at the state of Hawaii, the state of Washington. And just for fun, we might look at Florida, which has not been as shut down as the other states that I just mentioned. So I've surveyed these states. I'm looking at their documents. They have not required COVID vaccines, and that's a great thing, but they are requiring other ones. California in particular has basically, I would say, some of the most dramatic and extreme requirements. And we're going to be looking at that. The good thing is that a lot of parents have taken their children out of California schools, not only public, but private, because they sort of follow what the public schools are doing. And more families are pursuing education at home or in small community groups, kind of like the one-room schoolhouse, which worked back in the day. All right. I want to share with you a summary, really a generalization of an email that came in. Several emails came in, and how troubling it was for me that these individuals kind of fell for the headlines announcing Trump's order called Keeping Education Accessible and Ending COVID-19 Mandates in Schools. By fell for the headlines, I mean they thought that it meant ending federal funding for all vaccines, and it doesn't mean that. So let me just very simply and clearly, I'm going to break down. In fact, let's do this. Let's go back and look at the executive order. And that way we'll go through this together. And if you haven't read it, it's very short. This is an opportunity for you to kind of look over my shoulder to see how I do my critical thinking. You probably are doing the same since you're a healthy American. So keeping education accessible and ending COVID-19 mandates in schools. I am filming this. It's Monday, February 17th, 2025. This came out on February 15th, which was the weekend. So he gives his purpose and policy. Some school districts and universities continue to coerce children and young adults into taking the COVID-19 vaccine by conditioning their education on it. Now, I would like to have evidence of that, and it may be that it does exist. I looked at the most shut down states, and my rationale was that if they're not requiring it, then why would states like Tennessee and Oklahoma and Kentucky require it? Because they weren't as shut down as California. I would like you to do some backup research for me. And if you can find a school that is still requiring this, let me know so I can share that information and adjust my statements here. He also goes on to say others may re-implement such mandates. And in that case, absolutely, this is a great step. I applaud it. I support it. And it ideally is going to have an impact. Parents and young adults should be empowered with accurate data. Now, here's where I'm going to start to break this down, and I'll let you know why this is so troubling for me. Parents and young adults should be empowered with accurate data regarding the remote risks of serious illnesses associated. I'm going to use the word cooties because who knows if YouTube is going to have an algorithm that will crawl and listen to my comments, not realizing I'm reading it straight from the president. So I'll use the word cooties for children and young adults, as well as how those risks can be mitigated through various measures, and they should be left free to make their own decisions accordingly. Now, why couldn't that be extended to all of the cocktails? That's the other word I'm going to use. Why only to cooties? I'm going to break this down for you. You let me know in a comment below if you're going to follow my rationale and where I'm going with this, because I think this sets a dangerous precedent. I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. Let's finish reading through the executive order. He goes on to say, this is a key point here. Given the incredibly low risk of serious cooties illness for children and young adults, threatening to shut them out of an education is an intolerable infringement on personal freedom. Let's break this down. What else does this say? What is not being said, but is being said? All right. Given the incredibly low risk of serious cooties illness for children and young adults, threatening to shut them out of an education is an intolerable infringement on personal freedom. Most people are going to read, it's an intolerable infringement on personal freedom. Friends, that's what I stand for on this channel. That's what I've been teaching about for years. I agree that any required medical intervention by anyone, even your doctor, is not legitimate. You and you alone have the right. And if you're a child, it's your parents who have a right to decide what to do with your body, period. No school, no White House, no doctor. You have the choice. So I applaud the statement about an intolerable infringement on personal freedom. Let's go back to the beginning of this. You're going to say, there you go again, Peggy. You're cherry picking. No, I'm actually looking at what is written, and I'm looking at the meaning of the words, and I'm looking at the message that is contained. Let's look at it. Given the incredibly low risk of serious cooties illness, that means it leaves the door open. In fact, let me just go face to face with you here for a moment so that we can talk about this. This leaves the door open for down the line, if the illness does actually present a serious consequence for children and adults, then the executive order could say, well, now that we know that, and maybe replace cooties with the bird flu or something else. So it creates, I just want to explain why this is so troubling for me. All right. It does not apply to all of the shots, only the COVID shots. This is troubling to me because it gives the impression that the other shots are necessary and they shouldn't be questioned. And that the other shots that the children are required to take in order to go to school are, in their new phraseology, necessary, safe, and effective. Why aren't those brought up in this? And you're going to say, Peggy, he has to do it step by step. Well, that may be. I will agree with you on that. But I am looking at the other message that is leaving the door open to bring back additional shots, additional cocktails, as I call them, once or if evidence is shown that children and young adults are at risk. It's my view, and probably yours if you're a healthy American. Now, I know there are some that come to this channel that are fully Human pincushions, they think that that's medicine. It's the greatest thing in the world. So I understand their comments that applaud RFK for telling parents to be have their children become human pincushions. I understand. But for those of you that have been on board or maybe just found the channel and you are a person who favors individual choices when it comes to your health, not the government. I don't think the government needs to tell us what to eat and how much to exercise and all of that. Then you probably understand that this order should have applied to all of those, or at least have made a mention about it. So this order gives the impression that all of the other shots are okay for children and young adults to get in order to attend school. As I said, these COVID shots are not even required now. So I don't know the purpose of this other than to prevent it in the future. And I agree with you. But I'm going to share with you all of the other shots that they are requiring. But let's go back to the order, and I'll give you some of my comments as well so you can see exactly where I'm coming from. And it's very important because these are written specifically to leave the door open for future mandates, as Trump is calling them. He says that such mandates usurp parental authority and burden students of many faith. I agree. I would underline, highlight, bold, and shout that from the rooftops, but not predicated, meaning not based on this first sentence that the reason why they shouldn't be required is because of the incredibly low risk of catching this illness. So Trump goes on to say that it's the policy of his administration that discretionary federal funds should not be used to directly or indirectly support or subsidize an educational service agency. Let's look at, he does not give any definition of discretionary federal funds. So that, I don't even know what that means. Maybe there are mandatory federal funds that will not be withdrawn. So I need to, and maybe you can help me determine and research exactly what are the discretionary federal funds. Now, he does give all of the other definitions about secondary schools, state educational schools, but does not talk about the discretionary funds. It also says that this order will take effect as soon as practicable. Issue guidelines are given. So it's not going to be immediate. Within 90 days, they're going to come up with a plan to end those shots and possibly any proposed legislation. They're going to talk about grants. They're going to talk about how they can do this within the extent of the law. It's a very short order, and I'm grateful for that because sometimes these executive orders are written in such a way as to be very cumbersome and confusing. So if you're just joining me on this broadcast, I want to break this down very simply. Trump's order only refers to the COVID shots, which are not currently being required by any of the schools that I researched. And I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. I researched California, New York. We also are going to look at Hawaii and Washington, some of the most shut down states. So it doesn't have any current impact other than to make people feel good. If you find anything different, please let me know so I can correct the information. I think some people in the flurry of Trump's executive orders, which is done intentionally. I'm going to do a video for you coming up in a day or two about his shock and awe approach, which makes it very difficult for people to stay on track with what he's doing and not really dig deeper like I am. I certainly cannot cover every single executive order or presidential actions as it's listed on the website, but I know that these are of importance to my viewers, which is why I'm covering this. So his executive order for me regarding these shots is very troubling. Let me just summarize, and then I will share with you the actual list of cocktails, as I call them, that the schools are requiring. I'll show you my evidence. So it gives the impression that the other shots are necessary, safe, and effective. And it kind of like gives tacit legitimacy to those shots. Like, well, yes, of course, children get measles and children get mumps. And apparently they get other things that these schools are requiring. So of course they should get those. And here's what's troubling for me, friends. It seems to me that all of the moms that have been speaking out against this over the last several years are suddenly going, you know what? Yeah, probably the childhood ones are good. It's probably just the ones that haven't been tested. After all, it was rushed to market and there wasn't enough safety data. That's what Ice-T says, and many others. They're using that as their shield to hide behind. There just wasn't enough safety testing. That's what Del Bigtree and Aaron Siri and Bobby Kennedy Jr. are saying. They just weren't tested enough. So let's do more testing. Let's put more children on the firing line to get these cocktails. Let's harm more animals because there's horrible torture that goes on in these medical settings and research places in order to determine whether or not poison can be safe. And it enriches the pharmaceutical companies in the meantime. So no, I'm not in favor of that. So I'm troubled by the narrative going in that direction. That it's only the new ones that we need to worry about. It's just the mRNA, everybody at the mR. Oh, I got my songs confused, friends. It's only those that we need to be concerned about. That's where the conversation is going. You may agree with it. I don't. I have a different perspective. So why not ban federal funding for the other cocktails? Now I need to put a little space here for the algorithm, but many schools, these are kind of the basic ones that they require. Measles, mumps, rubella. That's called the MMR. The next one that they combine is called tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, Tdap. So if you ever cut yourself, you ended up in the emergency room and they come at you with a needle and you're like, what's that? And they say, oh, it's a tetanus shot. Well, it's actually tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. So you're getting it all. You're getting a trifecta. And guess what? You can say no. That's all you need to say is no, thank you. And just no, thank you. They can't force that on you. Varicella. It sounds like an Italian dish, but it's actually chicken pox. They gave it a fancy name. And some schools, especially at the college level, require the meningococcal conjugate. So that is for meningitis, as we're told. In California, some of them are pushing the HPV. I'm going to show you the list from California. So by ignoring those shots, Trump's order is basically stating that those are necessary and useful. I can hear you already. Come on, Peggy, give the man a chance. He's going to start with the cooties. Later, he'll get rid of funding for those other ones. I hope so. I love that. It would be amazing, but I'm not going to hold my breath because he's already coming out with the one for cancer with the robots making it for you. You may think that's great too. Does Operation Warp Speed ring any bells? And I know you're already saying, Peggy, come on. Trump was just trying to protect the country. He didn't know any better. Fauci and Bricks were the ones telling him all this stuff. How is it that you and I knew not to go along with it and Trump didn't? Just asking. Oh, and then I also have people who say, Peggy, you never talk about Trump. You never bring up what he did. And then I have other people who write and say, Peggy, you're always criticizing Trump. Yes, friends, it's exactly like that. I never say anything about him and I criticize him. Such is the nature of being a YouTuber. Let me share with you before we look at the list of the cocktails that are required by the schools. There are a couple other things that bother me about this fixation on the COVID shot. Throughout the years, yes, it's been years now, and the issues here for me, several lawsuits have been filed over the years, and they argued that these cooties cocktails should not be mandated, and here's why. Because they're not really vaccines as defined. I know many of you have other definitions for that. And even the CDC apparently changed the definition of that shot and what it meant so that the cooties could fall under that. So these lawsuits said, hey, we're not even talking about the same thing. The other thing they said was, you know what? They were rushed to market. They didn't get the adequate safety testing. You know how I feel about that? It's basically a red herring. Let's talk about the testing so we don't talk about your rights. Like, I'm really tired of talking about the shots, actually. Then the other statement that they make, which is what Trump is saying that it doesn't really affect children. And that's the other thing they said when it came to these lawsuits related to schools requiring these cocktails. The attorneys put in their lawsuits, you know, children aren't even really affected by this illness. So why should they have to get the jab for it? That was one of their arguments. And that's what Trump is saying. Then these lawsuits also said, you know what? These cocktails, they didn't even really prevent transmission after all. So how could they be required if they didn't even do what we were told they were going to do? And the other thing they say is they don't even actually, not only do they not protect against transmission, they don't even protect the person who has it, because they might get this illness again. I want you to think through that. You might agree with all of those, and those actually may be facts. In fact, they probably are. But here's the problem with making that your raison d'etre. How do you like my French? Your reason for being, your basic arguments in these lawsuits. I find many flaws in these arguments because it leaves the door open to change every single one of those statements. Then where do you stand? How do you have a legal argument then? So if they weren't really vaccines, as the CDC said, well, what if they change the definition again? Okay, take that one off the list. You can't use that as your argument. They were rushed to market without adequate safety testing. Well, what if they do all the testing and Junior comes out and says, now that I'm at the helm, you can trust me. I know my wives couldn't trust me because I cheated on them, but that's all behind me. That's all in the past. I repent, and you can trust me because I'm from the government. And I've done all the safety tests. And I know I used to have concerns about these other problems for children, but it probably comes from eating too many Fruit Loops. I don't think it comes from the jabs after all. Jabs good, as my friend Sage Hannah says. Please follow that Substack. And now Junior will say, I've got my own jab. It's the Junior jab, and it has my approval. It's safe. I did all the safety testing with the pharmaceutical companies that got paid, and it's safe. And it actually does work, unlike the other ones. We've improved it. So now where's your lawsuit? If you said they don't work and that they were rushed to market and they didn't prevent transmission and they didn't protect people from the illness, and now Junior comes out and says, yes, they do. Well, you don't have an argument anymore, a legal argument. So a better legal argument is, it's my body and no one gets to tell me what to do with it, including the government, including the military, including my doctor, including my employer and my child's school and the airlines and grocery stores and restaurants and everything else. That's the argument. It's the only argument. Look, if you believe in these products and you want to take them, be my guest. You can have my doses, all right? You can have them. That's absolutely fine. If you want to eat Fruit Loops, eat Fruit Loops. If you want to drink giant big gulps, drink the giant big gulps. I don't think the government should have anything to say about it. My choices are different. You might have piercings and tattoos. I don't. I like to wear jewelry and lipstick and makeup. You might not like to. These are personal choices. And that's what our country was built on, was individual liberty, not the common good. So that's what troubles me about this. So let me state for the record, of course, you probably already know that I don't believe in safety testing for poison. I don't believe that health comes from a poison dart. No person is deficient in whatever is in these products and needs to have it injected into their bodies. These illnesses, as they are called, might actually serve a purpose for children. Perhaps there's a mechanism that God created with our beautiful design. We are not machines, by the way, and we don't have a computer. We have a brain and a body and a soul, although I'm wondering about some people. I hope you like my humor, friends. These childhood conditions could actually be a mechanism whereby God uses them to create protections for future things down the road. It's possible. I have more faith in God, and I know that we all are going to meet our demise, and God alone knows the day and the time. And I'm going to live life fully and freely every day without fixating on being worried about these things. So there we have it. I don't like how this opens the door, but what I want to share with you now is the actual information that I have from New York, California, Hawaii, and Washington. So let me share my screen. This is coming directly from my Substack, and I have links for you there. I can show you the direct links as well. So these are the current requirements in California for elementary, middle, and high school. I will also share with you college. So Here is what children need to get. And tomorrow I'm going to show you how many doses they need for each one. And I'm going to have 2 videos for you tomorrow. One talking about how I came up with these numbers of 80 plus cocktails. And then I'm going to share with you resources that you can use to educate yourself and parents in a non-snarky, aggressive way, just like factual information. I've shared it before and I want to share it again. So in California, children need to get diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. And they need to get a polio vaccine. They need to get a hepatitis B. They need to get measles, mumps, and rubella. And they need to get the chicken pox, which is now that varicella. That sounds to me like some kind of Italian dish. So, but notice what's missing. No requirement for cooties. This was published in 2024. So cooties is already off the list in California, arguably the most shut down state with the highest number of required shots. Let's look at the University of California, all right? All incoming UC students are required to have their childhood shots, as they're called, the measles, mumps, rubella, the varicella, the tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, and they have to get the meningitis. They have to be screened for TB, and they have to get a flu shot. Now, not every school requires that. And I have that, where did I get that for you? All right. No, we're going to look at that on another day. That's New York. All right. This comes directly from the University of California, UC Health, immunization requirements and recommendations. Now, they do recommend this. That's not going to prevent them from getting any funds from Trump. So the hepatitis A, hepatitis B, the HPV, meningitis B, meningitis, so it just goes on and on and on. And you'll see that California gives you a whole list of flu mongering to make you be afraid. But I do not see anything there, even on the recommended for COVID. They're not even recommending it. So let's go on. We've got... this comes from the University of Hawaii, and I'm going to share that with you from the Substack. And then we also have, this is University of Washington. I'm going to share with you the information I got. This comes from University of Florida. Let's just look at that. They require MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. They require the hepatitis B. This is for the university. Meningococcal tuberculosis screening. Now, they have an option for COVID, for tetanus, for chickenpox. So every state does it differently. That was my purpose of sharing that with you. We've also got New York. Let's look at University of Hawaii. You just check a box. Pretty good for that one. In fact, I've got everything for you that I embedded into my Substack. So we'll take a look here. And that's where I've got it. So New York University says, as of January 22nd, 2024, students are no longer required to provide the university with certification that they have been vaccinated with appropriate cooties cocktails as defined by the university. Friends, that's a year ago, over a year ago. So no, Trump's order only takes effect if they want to bring it back. So University of Hawaii does not require any cooties. University of Washington, all they want is measles and mumps and meningitis. That's pretty easy. So we can see that these cooties cocktails are not being required in order for students to attend school. It doesn't make sense to just single that out, especially if you're going to talk about how this infringes personal freedom or those for their children. It just troubles me when people don't dig deeper, when they read the headline and they think this applies to all of the cocktails, or they think that these schools are still requiring them. So friends, critical thinking, as you know, requires digging deeper. That's all. Asking questions, doing the research, considering the narrative or the agendas that might be promoted. On a side note, I got an interesting email. Let me just summarize it for you. Somebody emailed and said, Peggy, I find it interesting that your organization is called the Healthy American, and you've called it that since 2020, and that your favorite, Bobby Kennedy, has come up with Make America Healthy Again. She's like, it kind of reminds me of the Healthy American, but I don't know how the government can make people healthy. And so I thought that was interesting because I really feel the same way. How do you make someone healthy? I don't like the sound of that. I would say maybe inspire. And I know it's kind of that riff on make America great again. I understand that it's kind of a catchy thing, but I thought it was interesting that she drew a connection to the healthy American that started first. So thank you, everybody, for being on board. I really appreciate you. A shout out to the moderators. And I will be talking about information, exactly how I came up with those number of jabs that I've been talking about Kennedy promoting for parents to do to their children. And I was calling it 70. Somebody emailed me and said, and she's actually the parent of a child, sadly, who passed away after undergoing this medical protocol. And so she is very much on the front line. She said it is up to 80. So I looked at the information. I counted it all up. We're going to actually be going to the CDC site. We're going to look at the number of doses. I want you to have this information to share with others. So even though you're like, Peggy, I don't participate, I'm not interested, it's likely that a neighbor, a friend, a relative, a coworker, someone you know may be saying, I've been thinking about this, but I don't know where to get the info. And that's what I want to share with you. All right. Thank you for being on board. I appreciate having you as healthy Americans. And I'll see you in tomorrow's broadcast that kicks off at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. And I'll see you then.